Okay, so hello.
Okay, Jay, how are you?
Good afternoon.
Good
Is like how you
afternoon.
like Dr. Gates or like Professor Gates or
Professor Gates is fine.
okay. So my name is KJ. I'm a fourth grader at Mattapani Elementary in PG County, Maryland. This interview is for something called like a passion project, but it's more known as Genius Hour. And I know you're a writer, and I'm also a writer too.
Good.
And I'm also an artist. And I
You got me
painted
on that.
I painted
You got me on that
this.
one.
I
Oh,
painted that.
that's very impressive.
Thank you.
Professor Gates, I said the same thing. I'm not supposed to be jumping in, but he did this in his room, and I said, "What in the?" Because he was 9, and I'm like, "This is something special, KJ." Okay,
Now that's something special.
Thank you.
You got
Okay,
you got a good mama. Your mama love you.
So can you introduce yourself?
I'm Henry Louis Gates Jr., and I am a professor at Harvard University.
Okay. What made you start writing your books?
I had a story I wanted to tell, and I wanted to share my insights about the history of the African people and the African American people. So that's why I started writing books.
So do you believe that like we live in a racism driven world?
No, I don't think that it's racism that drives the world. I think it's economic security and prosperity that drives the world. But in the name of the pursuit of economic prosperity, people demonize other groups of people because there's not enough to go around. And they demonize them because of their religion, because of their sexual orientation, because of their gender, because of their ethnicity, their nationality, and because of their race. So that's why the Germans killed the Jewish people. Hitler also wanted to kill the Roma people, also known as gypsies. The Europeans exploited Africa for economic gain. I think it's economics that drives the engine, and difference is summoned in order to justify the economic exploitation of other people.
Okay. So when did you think that you realized that there was a real problem with all the racism, all the problems with people judging people just because they think they're better than somebody?
Well, I grew up in the height of the classic civil rights period. I was born in 1950. So when Emmett Till was so brutally murdered, I was just in elementary. I hadn't even started first grade. And when Rosa Parks sat down on that bus, I was 5 years old for the Montgomery bus boycott. And then when President Eisenhower sent troops to Little Rock to integrate Central High School, I was in the second grade. I was 7 years old. How old are you now, KJ?
I'm currently 10.
10, I was in the fifth grade. That was 1960. A year later was the Freedom Riders. So I grew up with the modern civil rights movement. So it was on television. I watched when President Eisenhower sent federal troops to Little Rock to integrate Central High School when I was in second grade. I watched that with my parents on TV. So I didn't experience racism myself, but I went to a white school that integrated in 1955, and I started school in 1956. And I was very well treated. My parents were very prominent in our town. And I did not experience up to that time racism myself in the schools, but I watched it on TV. And also parents talked about it, and they'd experienced racism their whole life.
Do you think watching all those incidents on TV might have like maybe scarred you or like made you aware, kind of?
That's an interesting question because every parent has to decide, if you're Jewish, when are you going to tell your kids about the Holocaust? That 6 million Jewish people were murdered, by the Nazis. If you're an African-American parent, as I am, and now I'm a grandparent, when do you start to tell them about slavery? And when do you tell them about lynchings? That's a difficult question, and each parent has to decide that for herself or himself. But no, I don't think it scarred me because I was in a very secure, loving environment. I would look at things on TV and contrast it with the warm, nurturing, supportive environment that I felt both at home and at school. And it made me realize that I was lucky, but it also made me feel sorry for the people who are experiencing those forms of racism. And it made me very angry. It made me sad, but also made me determined to try to do something about it.
Okay. So I watched your video called 42 Million Ways to Be Black.
Uh-huh.
And if you do believe that there is 42 million ways to be Black, then like, how do you think people manage to group a lot of us together?
Well, one way we're grouped together is through fear. When we're attacked, look, you have, how many really good friends do you have?
Probably like 3.
Are they Black?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are they the same or are they different kind of people, different personalities?
They're really different.
Okay. That's my point. That we're all different. We're as different as fingerprints in our personalities. I'm sorry, but there are things that make us react in common. And one of it is, one of those things is racism. Because you and your 3 other friends could be very different. But if a racist says you're not different than them, you're all Black, that brings you together. So one way that we're united is negatively, and that's by the threats on our being because we're Black. But the other way, there are many other ways that people of African descent are united, and that's because we share a common culture, ways of worshiping, ways of listening to music, ways of dancing, ways of just enjoying, ways of eating food. All those things are cultural. We share a common culture so that we can be different and unique, even disagree politically, but united by our common culture. So both things are true at the same time.
Okay. Do you think that there is like any way that you can be, like any actions you can do that might make you like Black or not Black?
Very few. I think for a person to be, obviously if a Black person said they should bring back slavery, that would be pretty un-Black. But they'd have to go a very long way. I believe in intellectual and ideological freedom. People have a right to disagree. There are a significant number of Black people who voted for Donald Trump. I have no idea why, but they did. They have a right to do that. This is America. This is what a democracy is. But I hate to, and a Black person who would be against affirmative action would be pushing my buttons, because affirmative action is a way to create class mobility and social mobility within a traditionally, racist society. And for a Black person who benefited from that, like Clarence Thomas, then to be against it, I think is hypocritical.
With the 4 years of Donald Trump, do you think like there was a whole lot that that he could have did better, or that kind of like that like went wrong there?
I think Donald Trump is a racist. And I think that I don't think he used to be. I don't know if he's genuinely racist, but if not, he is, excuse me, if not, he's performed a very convincing role. And I think he's an opportunist more than he is a racist, but I think that he appeals to white supremacy in order to attract supporters. And he thought that he could appeal to the worst fears of white people and create a power base that would be permanent. I mean, he wanted to throw out the election results. Basically, he wanted a coup d'etat to occur. And he did that by manipulating people's fears. And one of the fears he manipulated was the fear that Black people and brown people, immigrants, were taking over the world, stealing, in effect, the prosperity of the traditional white middle class. And when people are afraid, they lash out. And that's what Donald Trump was a genius at, exacerbating the fears of middle class white America and working class white Americans.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, KJ. I appreciate that, my brother.
Do you so when you write, do you put a lot? Do you think a whole lot on what you're writing, or do you just like ideas just come? They just come to you it's real easy?
No, I think about it a lot, and I make notes, like my little post-it pads, and then I sit down to write. But as I write, and I write on this keyboard on my iPad, and as I write, ideas come. Once I start writing, more and more ideas come. But I spend a lot of time preparing with notes. Like I have these file folders. Can you see all these file folders?
Mm-hmm.
They're full of notes for things that I want to write about or speak about. And I'm old school. I'm 71 years old, so I still print things out from the internet, and I put them in files and I organize them. And so old-fashioned way, but it works.
So when did you start knowing that racism is here and it's bad?
Oh, when I was watching the news with my parents in elementary school, as the civil rights movement unfolded, and you would listen to adults in the barbershop, you listen to the older men talk, you listen to your parents talking with their friends. When you're a little kid, you're always listening, and what your parents say, even when you're not supposed to. And they talked about, that's not all they talked about, but during a racial crisis, that's what they talked about. And that's when you knew things were bad. But my parents never despaired. My brother is an oral surgeon. He's 5 years older than I am. And they just told us we had to be 10 times smarter than white kids, that we could make it, but that we had to be better than they were, because there were racists who would try to keep us from achieving our success. So we worked hard, and my brother graduated the number 2 person in his high school class, and I graduated the number 1 person in my high school class.
To add to that, can you share some ways that racism looked then versus how it looks now?
Well, there are many ugly aspects of racism were exactly the same then and now, with people, beating up Black people or discriminating against them or trying to keep them out of universities, like your mother's alma mater and mine. I went to Yale. She just graduated from Harvard. 50 years ago, your mother wouldn't have gone to Harvard. 50 years ago, I wouldn't have gone to Yale. affirmative action enabled us to go to those universities. It didn't get us in, but it lifted a racist quota, an historical racist quota that limited the number of Black women who went to Radcliffe or to the School of Education, or Black women and men who went to any of the schools at Harvard. So that's a big difference. There are a lot more Black people, obviously, dramatically more at historically white institutions than there were 50 years ago because of affirmative action. So racism is, in some ways, just as explicit as it was in the old day, like the way Haitian immigrants are treated as opposed to Cuban immigrants, for example, because most of the Cuban immigrants were white and all the Haitian immigrants were Black. And there was a double standard on how exiles from those two islands were treated. But on the other hand, you know, it's more subtle. Sometimes it's explicit, and sometimes it's implicit. And because there are more people watching now. We have social media. We can complain. You know, we have the legal defense fund. We can file lawsuits. It's harder for someone to get away with being a racist today than it was 50 years ago, and that's good. But on the other hand, we have a big class divide within the African American community. We have the largest Black middle class and upper middle class in history, but the size of the Black underclass, as measured, excuse me, by the percentage of Black children who live in poverty, is still in the 30%. You know, it's still a lot. It's the same as it was 20, 30 years ago. So that's a big difference in the structure of the Black community today.
Would you say things are better now than they were then?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Because, you know, your mother could graduate from Harvard, I could teach at Harvard, and you could interview me for a website that you're creating at your school. I think things are much better. But we still have a long way to go. How about you? Do you think things are better?
Based on what I've heard from like the news, my grandma, I would say that things are better too, because there's not as much segregation going on right now.
Right, there's not as much legal segregation. You know, all those laws are gone. The laws that kept you from marrying who you wanted, or living in certain neighborhoods, or going to certain schools, all that's gone. So that's good. But there's still forms of discrimination that are de facto, or that are in fact not de jure, which is not according to the law. But it's better to live in a society without those legal means of discriminating, without a doubt. And we have more Black people on TV. We have a Black couple lived in the White House for 8 years. We have more Black men and women in Congress, more Black people on Wall Street. We have by 1,001 measures, things are much better for the Black community than they were 50 years ago, but without a doubt.
So have you ever do you get like lots of hate for your writing, or it's just your work entirely?
You mean hate mail?
Yeah, or like negative comments.
Well, I don't know. I never read comments on social media because that keeps you more happy. But yeah, of course, I've gotten hate mail before. Death threats, hate mail. But I don't read that stuff. But if you get I don't read it on social media, but if you get it in the mail, then we give it to the FBI. All Harvard professors have to do that. But I don't get that much. I get a lot of, I have the #1 show on PBS, Finding Your Roots. I get a lot of love mail too. Much more love mail by 1,000,000 times than hate mail.
So I know you have done like lots of writings, TV shows, films, and books. And a lot of them have been about race. So what made you decide to dedicate so much of your writings and works to race?
Because I love Black culture and Black history. It's like, what's your favorite meal, KJ?
Probably mac and cheese.
Okay, well, Black history is my mac and cheese intellectually. I just like it. There's nothing. It's just the way it is. I took my first bite of Black history, and it tasted as good as like mac and cheese that Samantha makes, your mama makes. So I do what makes me feel good, and what makes me feel good is writing about the Black experience. I don't do it as a duty. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it, because I think that that's how you should pick what you want to do, KJ. You should pick a career that turns you on, that makes you happy. And learning about the Black experience makes me happy. It doesn't make me more of a race man or woman than somebody who doesn't. It's just what feels good to me. And that's how everybody should choose their career. It's like my vocation is my avocation. Do you know what an avocation is, KJ?
No.
Avocation is a hobby. So my work is my hobby. My hobby is my work. And that is the best way to pick a career. When your vocation, meaning your work, your occupation, is your avocation, which means your hobby, your pleasure. I love my work, and that's why I do it. I don't do it to help anybody. I don't do it because it's good for humanity. I do it because it's good for Henry Louis Gates Jr. I love it. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Maybe an artist, maybe like I play some sports, so like maybe maybe a sports player.
What do you play?
I play soccer, ping pong, and I do swimming sometimes.
Oh well, I'm pretty good at ping pong. We can come up here. I'll be challenging you, boy. But I love soccer. I just watched Ukraine and Scotland in the qualifying match just this afternoon. Ukraine won 3-1. All right, are we about done? You got one more question. Is that okay?
Yeah. Okay. So it seems to me like people think Black people are poor and in poverty, so they can treat us like we're not as good as them. Mm-hmm. And I think that the way to end that type of racism is for people to realize that Black is beautiful, and our culture, speech, and background are all beautiful and worthy of fair treatment. And that's like the first part was why I thought racism was a thing. But why do you think racism is a thing? How do you think it like came to be?
Well, I ask it again. Why do I think people are racist?
Yeah. Why do you think it's just a thing in general? Racism.
I think it's a thing because in part it's a legacy of slavery and followed by Jim Crow racism. When there was a whole apparatus created designed to convince white people that we were inferior, that we were biologically inferior, that we were closer to the animal kingdom than we were to other human beings. And that's basically hypnotized Western culture when it comes to the estimation of who Black people are. And there are a lot of people who still believe those horrible things about us, that we are animal-like, that we aren't intelligent, that we're meant to be workers in the field rather than the owners of the field. But that was created to justify our economic exploitation. And that goes back to the answer to your first question, which is I think racism follows from the need to justify an economic order in which one group exploits another group. And that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. All right, Samantha, is this enough for the website?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was right on time. When you said that, like that was his last question. Why is it a thing? So that was Perfect
good.
timing. That wrapped us up.
Well, KJ, you're an excellent interviewer. They were very
Thank you.
intelligent questions. You're very poised. I could not have conducted this interview when I was your age, and that just shows what a good mama you have.
Yeah,
She's
she helped.
and she's one of my favorite students, one of my best students, and you should be proud of her. All right. Well,
Thank
send
you
me
so
a
much,
link.
Professor Grace. KJ, can you give a thanks, or it's been a pleasure?
So
or-
it's been a pleasure and an honor to talk to you, and thank you for letting me interview you.
Well, I hope to see you in class at Harvard in a few years. All right.
I hope
God
to.
bless. Good
Okay,
luck.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.
Take care.
Bye,
Take
Samantha.
care.
Big hug.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Love you. Bye-bye.